That rainy morning felt ordinary in every possible way. I woke to the gentle tapping of water against the kitchen window, the kind of quiet drizzle that seemed to wrap the whole city in a grey blanket. My husband, Thomas, had already left for work. His coffee mug still sat on the counter, faint warmth lingering in the ceramic. The scent of his cologne floated softly through the room, a familiar trace of the life we had shared for so long. After decades of marriage, our mornings had become predictable and calm. We moved through routines without thinking, like actors who had memorized their lines long ago. I believed those routines meant security. I believed they meant trust. That morning I decided to do something unexpected. I thought a surprise visit to his office might brighten his day. Thomas had been distant lately. He worked later hours than usual, and sometimes his explanations felt incomplete. Still, I convinced myself there was a harmless reason for it all. Perhaps he was planning something for our upcoming anniversary. Hope can be stubborn like that. On the way downtown, I stopped at a small bakery and bought his favorite chocolates, the dark kind with a touch of sea salt. The clerk wrapped them carefully in silver paper and tied them with a red ribbon. It looked simple and thoughtful, just like the gestures that had once defined our relationship. Driving toward his office, I watched the city blur through the rain. For a moment I felt younger, remembering the days when he was only beginning his career and I would bring him lunch just to see him smile. When I stepped into the building lobby, I greeted the security guard politely and told him I was there to see my husband. He looked confused. Then he said something that made the world stop. "Oh, Mrs. Dalton already left a little while ago." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "I'm Mrs. Dalton," I said quietly. Before he could respond, the elevator doors opened behind me. A woman stepped out. She was tall and confident, dressed in a sharp navy suit. There was an ease in the way she carried herself, like someone who belonged exactly where she stood. The guard smiled at her. "See you tomorrow, Mrs. Dalton." She nodded politely and walked past me without hesitation, barely noticing my presence. In that instant, something inside me shifted. Years of memories, promises, and quiet mornings suddenly felt fragile. My surprise visit had just turned into something far darker. I barely remember stepping into the elevator. My body moved on its own, driven by a strange mix of curiosity and dread. The polished metal doors reflected a woman I hardly recognized. She looked older than she had that morning, standing stiffly with a box of chocolates clutched in her hands like a misplaced gift. When the elevator reached the executive floor, the hallway was silent. Thick carpet softened my footsteps as I walked toward the office door with Thomas's name etched in glass. Through the frosted panel I could see his silhouette moving inside. For a moment I considered turning around and leaving. Pretending I had never come. Pretending my life had not just cracked open in the lobby downstairs. But betrayal has a powerful gravity. It pulls you toward the truth whether you want it or not. I opened the door. Thomas looked up, startled. My name slipped from his mouth like a confession. He looked as though he had seen a ghost. I placed the wrapped chocolates on his desk slowly, carefully. "I thought I would surprise you," I said. My voice sounded calm, which frightened me more than anger would have. Before he could respond, another man appeared in the doorway carrying a folder. He stopped mid-sentence when he noticed me. He mentioned lunch plans with someone named Claire. The name struck like shattered glass. Claire. The woman from the lobby. Silence filled the room once the man hurried away. Thomas avoided my eyes, rubbing the back of his neck like a man cornered by his own secrets. I asked him one simple question. Who was she? He hesitated, then exhaled heavily as if the truth had been waiting to escape. He told me he had known her for many years. At first it had been a mistake, he said. Something he thought he could end. But it had continued. And eventually there was a child. A daughter named Lily. The room felt smaller with every word he spoke. I stared out the window at the rain sliding down the glass while the weight of his confession settled around me. While I planned birthdays and holidays, he had been building another life. Another family. He stepped toward me, desperate to explain, insisting he had never stopped loving me. But love divided is not love at all. I picked up the chocolates from his desk and tore the ribbon free. The pieces scattered across the polished surface. "Here's your surprise," I said quietly. Then I walked out of the office without looking back. Writing. By the time I reached the car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the keys. Rain streaked across the windshield in thin grey lines while people hurried past with umbrellas, unaware that my entire world had just collapsed. I sat there for a long time before driving home. The house looked the same from the outside, but the moment I stepped inside everything felt different. The furniture, the photographs, the framed wedding portrait on the hallway wall all seemed like props from a performance that had already ended. I walked into our bedroom and opened Thomas's closet. His shirts hung neatly in perfect rows, arranged by color. For years I had admired how orderly he kept everything. My hand brushed across the fabric, and suddenly something inside me snapped. I began pulling the clothes down one by one. Jackets, ties, and shirts tumbled onto the floor. Drawers slid open as socks and papers spilled across the room. Then I noticed a small wooden box hidden beneath a stack of sweaters. It had a delicate brass lock. Curiosity and anger pushed me forward. I forced it open with a letter opener from the bedside table. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Thomas standing beside Claire at a beach. Thomas holding a little girl with bright eyes and a smile that looked painfully familiar. Birthday cakes, holiday decorations, moments from a life I had never seen. There were documents too. Financial papers and a lease agreement for an apartment somewhere across the city. Evidence of years spent living two completely different lives. My knees gave out beneath me. I sat on the floor surrounded by pictures that mapped out a story of quiet betrayal. Eventually the front door opened. Thomas's voice echoed through the hallway. When he stepped into the bedroom and saw the scattered photographs, the color drained from his face. He tried to explain again, but I stopped him. There was nothing left to say. I told him to pack his things and leave. He looked at me for a long moment, realizing the decision had already been made. Soon the door closed behind him. The house fell silent. For the first time in my life, I was completely alone. And strangely, the silence felt honest. The following morning felt unusually still. A thin fog lingered over the yard while the air carried the scent of damp earth after rain. I stood in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee, staring at the mug Thomas used every day. After a moment I placed it quietly in the sink. Some habits no longer belonged in my life. Later that day a locksmith replaced every lock in the house. Each metallic click echoed through the hallway like a small declaration of independence. When he left, I sat alone at the kitchen table. I expected tears, but none came. Instead I felt something quieter growing inside me. Control. That afternoon I called an old friend who had once practiced law. I told her I needed help starting a divorce. She did not ask questions. She simply told me to come by the next day. The hardest conversations came later when I called my children. They arrived that evening looking confused and worried. We sat together in the living room where they had once played as children. I told them the truth. Not every painful detail, but enough for them to understand that their father had been living another life for many years. Shock spread across their faces. Anger followed quickly after. They offered help, support, anything I needed. But the only thing I truly wanted was peace. When they finally left, the house felt different. Quieter, yes, but lighter too. The weight of waiting for someone else's footsteps had disappeared. Over the months that followed, I began rebuilding my life piece by piece. I started painting again, something I had not done since my younger years. I joined a small art class where people shared stories and laughter over messy canvases and bright colors. Eventually, I bought a second-hand camera and began photographing the world around me. Through the lens, I noticed beauty in simple moments again. Rain on the pavement. Flowers in a market stall. Strangers smiling without knowing why. Slowly, the pain faded into something softer. One evening as the sun set across the water, I realized